Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to Morning Minutes with myself, Michael Bergio, Mark Novak, and special guest. Very lucky to have Ed Horton on, who is responsible for the best developed office complex on the Northern Beaches, which is well known to anyone who's ever looked at leasing a commercial property, buying, many agents in the area. If basically any property that we're comparing that was inferior, it was to the lifestyle building. So welcome, Ed. It's great to have you on to hear your insights about the building and why you built it how you did, because it was very progressive and ahead of the time to many other office buildings on the Northern Beaches and especially Brookvale. Welcome.
So hey Ed, and also one other just something I want to give a bit of credibility for as well, for why people should watch this feature. This is something that in 2021 it's going to be very, very difficult with what's happened with COVID to move forward and do what we've always done with office space. And it's really interesting because what Ed's designed, I call it the Tesla. Like what Tesla did with cars, Ed has done with office space. And it's quite unique that not only that, but a lot of people conceptually, like you may have seen WeWork environments. I feel like almost like WeWork copied what Ed's developed, but they didn't actually get it right. So it's very, very interesting. And what we're going to do is dig deep into Ed and what he's done and why he's done this. It's called Lifestyle Working. There's two buildings, one that's in Collins Street in Melbourne. Correct me as I'm going wrong, Ed, if I'm wrong. One is in Brookvale or the Northern Beaches. And the big feature of this, and what Ed and I were talking about, is trying to get into a building in 2021 in an office tower of 36 or 55 floors and being limited to 2 people in the lift at a time. It's going to be very, very unusual, very incredible to see how this plays out. Getting into a bus or getting into a train to go to the CBD is going to be very, very interesting over the next 6 to 12 months. But Ed's got the solution. Ed, tell us about Lifestyle Working.
Look, thanks, Michael and Mark. I'll take you back very quickly, probably to around 2003. And what was keeping us awake at night was trying to find an equitable solution for sustainable buildings in the commercial sector. Up until then, the research that we did, most of the commercial buildings that were sustainable were for large corporates, governments, institutions, hospitals, universities. And the thing that was common amongst those sustainable buildings was that all of the owners, whether they were government or large corporates, just wrote a check. Okay, they didn't actually do a feasibility, go and get it valued, get it to stack up, because they couldn't get it to stack up.
It was a concept that only existed in the check, and then they felt like that was their responsibility fulfilled.
Well, it was creating, monuments to fabulous engineering and people with large checkbooks, because they actually couldn't get the buildings to stack up commercially. And that's why we weren't seeing, and probably to a great degree still not seeing, a proliferation of sustainable commercial buildings through our sectors around the world. So that was...
Ed, do you mind that Michael brings up the slides while you're talking as well, so people can put into context what you're talking about?
Yeah. So confronted by that challenge of creating a sustainable building and a smart sustainable building that actually stacked up, that we could actually do the numbers as a property developer, we could get investors, we could get a valuer to understand it, we could get financiers to understand it and back us, was a real challenge. So we kind of went out on our own, and to a great degree still out on our own. We challenged the whole way we actually design commercial buildings, how we build them, what we put into them, and how we operate in commercial buildings. So our desire was to create a smart and sustainable building on the Northern Beaches, so people who otherwise would travel anywhere up to 2 hours if you're at the other end of Palm Beach, if you're going into the city, try and create a building that is of A-grade commercial quality on the northern beaches, so you could actually live and work on the beaches. So
the numbers are incredible though. Like the people are happy to pay more for this. The sustainability is actually really paid back for you since you've built it, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you could almost think at the time, people may have thought that you may have been so ahead of your time. It was a little bit over the top or a little bit crazy, but it's really come into its own.
Yeah, look, certainly while we were putting it together and developing it, people did think we were crazy, to the extent that we couldn't find a real estate agent on the northern beaches to get their head around it because it was so different. So we set up our own agency.
Yeah.
Wow.
There for a second, I think I can really confirm that. So from an agent's point of view on the ground, when people are comparing offices to, say, this building to other buildings in the area, I definitely see it's probably from 10 to 25, maybe even higher percent higher in the rental rates achieved and the sale rates achieved. So I can really attest to you can still see it many years. It was completed in 2008. So we're almost, 12 years down the track, and it's still a superior product, which shows how ahead of its time it was in 2008. And I'm sure it was more expensive to build, but we're still seeing that return for owners in there, and people are enjoying it.
Yeah, well, one of the tricks to getting the compressed yield and the higher rents was that people took less space. So we did analysis way back when we were looking at the whole concept of challenging convention, that traditional office space, you had meeting rooms or multiple meeting rooms in your space, and they were invariably used around 40% of the time. So DEGW back in the, about 15 years ago, did a study around the world on the efficiency of commercial office space, and lo and behold, meeting rooms are used only 40% of the time. So what we did is we said, why don't we make these spaces more efficient and provide what we now call privileged spaces, which are shared community meeting spaces throughout our campus, and we call it more of a campus than and we then allowed all our tenants and owners to access those multiple spaces through the building, which held up to 50 people at no cost. And then we had semi-privileged spaces, which were open spaces with beautiful furniture, barbecues scattered throughout the building. So tenants and owners were able to take less space, about 20% less space than they otherwise would have taken. We still charge the same rent per annum, okay, which increases our meter rate. And that's how we get a between 20 and 30% increased rent. So people aren't paying any more per annum because they're taking less space.
Now, they don't pay electricity. Is this true? You've actually got 1,100 solar panels on this building.
Yeah, I had the image.
They do pay electricity, but they pay cheap electricity. So we've got
cheap.
We've got over 1,100 solar panels on the roof, and we've got an embedded electricity network. So the building has a license to trade energy. And the building buys wholesale energy, supplemented by all the solar, which is significant. But during the day, where you have the highest peak load, because it's an office building, as opposed to residential, where the highest load tends to be in the morning and the evening.
And I've just brought that image up on the screen so you can see solar panels. But I just want to reiterate, based on what you just said there, Ed, where Mark made the reference to a WeWork lifestyle, but on a larger scale here, and where that comes from with all the facilities and add-ons within the building, the solar, the pools, the cafe, restaurants, the external meeting rooms. And that's sort of where you can now see where that WeWork concept came from, off the back of what you've, not saying it's directly related, but you can sort of see where this was done and then how other people have run with it, because it was such a success. Because you're exactly right, that meeting room can take 30% of someone's office, and they're using it, what was it, point something of a time, very minimal.
If lucky.
Yeah.
So basically, you can take less space, still have all the same functions and facilities of an A-grade building in the city, and it's a large building. We're twice the size of the next biggest commercial building on the northern beaches. So it's over 12,000 square meters. If we stood it end on end, it'd be a 12-story building if it was in the city. But we're only a 2-story building. So we call it a ground scraper rather than a skyscraper.
Now, a ground scraper is going to be very good for our future of buildings, because a skyscraper is going to be very hard to get into and stay sanitized when you've got these rules of one person per lift or 2 people per lift. This is beautiful, and you're not doing a co-work environment either. So even the co-works, I think people are going to be a bit shy of. You've actually got your own offices, yeah?
You do. You've got your own offices. We do have some facilities in here where people can share desks. But one of the good things about, well, there's not a lot of good things about the building is there's no structural walls between any of the 164 office suites we have. So it's very fungible in terms of churn, of expansion and contraction. People can take 2, 3, 4 suites if they need multiple suites to make up a total square meters that they need. But they can release them and let them go. So it's not like you've got a space of 1,000 square meters and you try and sublet. It's somewhat complex and highly inefficient in a traditional office building. Here, you can actually just peel a space off and let it go.
Yeah, and you don't use water.
Go elsewhere within the building and still stay connected with your own phone network. So therefore, it's a bit like a campus.
And you don't use water?
We do.
From external?
We use
rainwater.
So
water from the grid, I should say, yep.
For using waterless urinals in commercial buildings. Our pans are flushed with, toilets are flushed with rainwater, and all our gardens are watered with harvested rainwater. So we've only had, I think, 1 incident in the last 12 years where our tanks ran dry. Otherwise, we've been self-sufficient in non-potable water since we completed.
What a building. So give me some more hard facts. We've got 13,000 square meters. We've got 165 offices. We've got average size of an office of 74.
400 basement car spaces. Huge.
Yeah. So we've got there's a lot of car parking. We punch into the Warringah Mall. So we've got a Warringah Mall on the left and, on 3 sides. And we designed the building to operate with cross-flow ventilation. So none of our common area has mechanical ventilation. So that is another cost saving from an outgoings perspective. We've got no carpet in the common area, so we don't have to replace carpet. And every suite has a front and a back for cross-flow ventilation. You'll notice as you go around the building, every suite has louvers. So you get the choice of turning your mechanical ventilation on or just cracking the louvers. And most people just crack the louvers to get airflow. We've got a car wash facility in the building, and that uses rainwater. So it's not on the mains. So every time you get your car washed, it's in rainwater. Back to the energy. The body corporate, 100% of the base building energy, so that's lifts, pumps, fans, lights, is paid for by the benefits of the embedded electricity network or the solar. So basically, the building will make a profit even after paying 100% of its base building energy. Wow. What that does is that profit goes to further reducing the base building or the building's operating costs and strata levies. So the strata levies in the building are very low, and everyone gets cheap energy.
And internet's included?
Incidents? How do you mean incidents?
Okay. So one thing I also got to point out for people that are watching, and if you've just tuned in, we're talking about probably one of the most impressive commercial buildings built in Australia. And this is a building that we believe as commercial agents that actually is going to forge forward in an environment after COVID-19 going into 2021. We think that what Ed calls a ground scraper, people aren't going to be up for high scrapers. I personally think that if you had a business like Telstra, ANZ, and you're running your essential services out of the CBD in a skyscraper, I think you would have been pretty impacted in the last 8 weeks and 10 weeks. And I think you'd be thinking about putting 600 employees in 10 different locations around Sydney rather than putting them in one location, the CBD. I think the world's changed. This is going to be very, very important, what we're talking about today and what Ed's designed. Now, just tell me something also, Ed, over to you. This has got to be impressive for one's business. So you've got a whole bunch of businesses in there. When you've got customers coming to visit you, like, what a wow factor the building's actually got. Like, it's, you know, if I just set up a new business and I had 3 staff and my customers were coming to visit me in your building, lifestyle working, I would be really impressed.
Yeah. Look, we've had an extraordinary effect on productivity because people are taking less space, and also staff retention. There was an accounting firm that was based in DY. I won't mention the name of the firm, probably the largest accounting firm on the Northern Beaches. And they were losing, before they came to our building, 2 people per month. Okay, so 24 staff they were turning over every year, year in, year out. They moved to our building. They were one of the first people to move in, and they took less space. So it was a consolidation exercise, and they're over, I think, about 5 floors in a number of buildings owned in DY, and they lost 0 staff in the first 2 years. So they went from losing 24 staff per annum to 0 staff. So just from a OH&S, HR, running your business, continuity of your customers and clients, training, they actually saved a fortune, like in the millions of dollars, by moving to our building, because people wanted to work there.
Who would have thought that? Who would have thought that? And they got, what I'm encouraging everyone that's watching to think is, this is just, we're only touching on a couple of aspects today, core aspects, but there must be hundreds or even thousands of other positive reasons. If you get the work environment right, that, you know, employment is better, customer service is better, environmental stuff is better, saving money, the efficiencies in one's business is bloody huge.
Yeah, it's quite significant. We've got 2 child minding centres adjacent to us, so quite a lot of staff bring their children to work or bring them next door. Being on the Northern Beaches, a lot of people ride their push bikes to work now. So we've got a bike store, we've got a boardroom for keeping surfboards, got furniture in it. We set it up with a boardroom, and that's where people can keep their boards so they can go for a surf during the day. So we've got a no tie policy. So on the front door of the building, where you've got no hawkers, no canvassers, we've got no neckties, as you would recall, Mark, when you came in the other day.
I was ready for a fight. I was like,
you felt much better, didn't you?
I was in fight or flight mode. So Ed said, "Can you take your tie off, mate?" And I was like, "Okay."
One thing I'd love to reference as well and go through, especially, I think this is a great example with anything, especially when it comes to property, when you take a bit more, when you think things through, maybe spend a bit more money initially, but it returns in your favor, because I don't want to sugarcoat it. The Northern Beaches has had a very soft commercial office market for quite some time, unlike the CBD, where they've got the lowest vacancies. It's probably the market where investors are least likely to go into. But this building, if anything, has had a lower vacancy than any other building out there, and it's still achieved the high rates compared to others. So it's a very good, so pat on the back, Ed, but it's a great case study of basically, and I'm assuming it may not have cost more, but it cost more in time to think about doing the added stuff like the solar panels and the efficiency. So if it didn't cost more money, it did definitely thought power, but it's paying itself off, because in one of the weaker markets, it's still thriving. I think your vacancy is probably, correct me if I'm wrong, probably one of the lowest it's been in maybe the 10 years. It's like all you got to do is jump on real commercial, and compared to what it was even 3 years ago, it's very low. Compared to other buildings, say your competitor buildings, there's generally two other buildings people compare when they're looking for a suite in your building. They're comparing to another, really two others, and it's going a lot better for sales and rentals. So I think to people out there when they're looking, because what you've said, Ed, it's very hard to put on a real estate ad. It's very hard to convey those benefits to a potential tenant, to a potential buyer. But what's your advice for people maybe looking to develop a building, and for investors, what are the hidden wow factor benefits that your building has that you may not see in your typical criteria on looking for a building that can help them looking for a good investment? Because that's where I see your building thrive.
Okay. So from an investment perspective, you really got to ask yourself the question as an investor or as an agent, why would somebody want to rent that space? Why would someone want to rent my space? And who would want to buy my space if I decide to sell it? And the question comes back to, is this a work environment? Is this a work environment where people would want to come to work? And it just so happens this building is a place where people actually want to come to work. And if they want to come to work here, that means people have their businesses there because they get stability and employment. Okay, and that all flows through to compressed yields, lower yields, and higher rents. And it's as simple as that. And then you ask yourself the question, well, why do people want to come and work here? And it's the open environment, it's the sustainability, it's the energy, it's the water, it's the accessibility to the mall, it's the parking, it's the childcare, it's the flexibility for businesses that they can expand and contract. So when Danny and I are looking at new places to go and build developments, we really struggle to find the right locations, and we really struggle to find, and that's in residential and commercial, because this flows through to our residential projects as well. It's the same ethos, it's the same, value proposition and sustainability and low operating costs. So that is the challenge, finding the right location. And we're just lucky here. We were a bit of a shag on a rock to start off with. People couldn't get their head around why we're building the largest commercial building on the northern beaches in an industrial zone, okay, next to a mall, where there are no commercial.
This is 15 years ago this brainchild was starting. 15 years ago, and you've built something that it's still ahead of its time. It's still coming. It's still being appreciated more and more and more.
Probably more so now, Mark, as you alluded to before with COVID. So what we did is we created a work where they lived, okay? So they didn't have to commute from Palm Beach or Newport or Brookvale into the city. And in the first year, 100% of our occupants, our owners of businesses in here, were local. There wasn't a single person who came from outside the community. They were in the community who otherwise worked in probably a rundown B grade, C grade building, which was generally offering on the northern beaches, or they commuted to Chatswood or North Sydney or the city. So we were like a breath of fresh air for people on the northern beaches. And whilst no one wears ties in here, there's a lot of very successful people in this building. And we'd have between 700 and 900 people in the building at full occupancy. So now with COVID, and you alluded to the problem of public transport, driving into the city, let's take the city, for example, and then limited amount of people are able to stand around in a foyer while they're waiting for a lift, and limited amount of people getting in a lift. So you can expect queues down George Street and Pitt Street of people, and it could be for an hour, waiting your turn to get in the lift. And that's just not sustainable. That your businesses can't run that way. So there has to be some solutions, and the solutions will be to create nodes for businesses outside the CBD, where people where people live, or at intersections where people live, and create disaggregated workplaces in low-rise buildings where you don't have to get in lifts. No one has to get a lift in our building. No one gets wet, even though it's an entirely open building. We've designed it with pathways and walkways and overhead coverage where it could be pouring rain and you don't get wet outside to get into our building.
And I think a big thing as well, just with what you're saying, I think a lot of the stigma or fear was only to be successful, you had to be in the city, and that's where the quality of buildings were. But you're 100% right. There are just now, I think people are realizing and accepting you don't have to be in the city to have a successful business. But for a very, very long time, only, let's say, A-grade buildings were developed there. So as you said, a breath of fresh air to have an A-grade building, not in the city, because a lot of people don't want to be there. A lot of people don't need to be there, but no one was offering that type of quality, if not better, outside of that area. So I think you definitely, as we always say on the show, and our ethos is, when everyone's running left, you go right. And basically, Northern Beaches, everyone was developing C-grade and C-grade, probably at best, commercial buildings, and here you go building an A-grade plus. I think people took time, like anything new, and I think you're going to have your best years moving forward now. And the next development that you do or acquire, especially in the Northern Beaches, because we are a bubble, but it's locals buying, it's locals operating, it's very, very insulated.
We like being in a bubble.
Sorry?
We like being in a bubble down here.
Yeah, 100%. It's phenomenal. So it's great to see.
So it's interesting that we're in this COVID environment. People are now telecommuting. So they're not going into the office. They're working from home. They're on platforms like we're on at the moment, Zoom. And interestingly, businesses are operating quite well using technology as that enabler. So when we first came up with our concept, we saw technology as an enabler to allow people to work remotely from a CBD, work out on the Northern Beaches in the bubble, but in a smart, connected environment. So this building we were one of the first to have fibre into the building. We were the first to put free internet, not just in the common areas, but we think we're still the only building in the country where included in your outgoings, you get unlimited data. Okay, wow. Speed data. So that comes with your office space. When you sign a lease or you buy a space, the part of the outgoings is providing a data pipe into your space. So no one buys data in this building. It comes with the outgoings.
It's actually the amount of firsts that your office space has had is just incredible. Yeah. And that's why, as we sign off, that's why that we think it's the Tesla of office spaces. It is just incredible. And guys and girls that are watching, this is not about how fancy you can get an office. You got it wrong. This is when we say class A, class B, class A office, it's not, you're not buying the wank. You may be getting a super high-end, lush-looking place, but what I've learned today and what I've learned from your building, Ed, is the functionality and the how practical every single aspect of what this building offers, lifestyle working in Brookvale, Sydney, Australia. This building is absolutely an iconic building for all architects, all developers, all office space dwellers in the country to look at. And I invite everyone. Are you allowed just to walk in, Ed, if people want to just cruise down there?
It's open. It's a public space.
It's public.
You can come and get
what's the address?
It's 117 Old Pittwater Road in Brookvale. 117 Old Pittwater Road.
It's going to blow your mind, guys.
Before we sign off, I'd love to get a quick little snapshot, Ed, of where you see the office market the next 2 to 5 and 10 years, and just a bit of a vision, and especially Northern Beaches, just your view on the commercial market.
Well, I think,
and one more question for me: is the city office space going to implode?
I don't know whether it's going to implode, but I think there's certainly some challenges ahead for high-rise buildings, and I know people are working furiously at trying to address those. But more importantly, I think there's a potential boom for commercial property in the suburbs and on the northern beaches, where we are going to see, just as a necessity, just from a health and OH&S, corporations even and governments are going to want to have a distributed or workplace closer to where people live. Low-rise buildings, I think this is going to be, some challenges for planners. I think councils and planners are going to have to take this on as a challenge, how they can actually facilitate more office buildings, look at rezonings, close to hubs, transport hubs. We need to think about parking for people to get to these places, because one of the challenges again is limiting the amount of people that get on buses and trains. So no longer can we say just get a bus or a train, because you might have to leave to get to work at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's not sustainable. So we need to create places where people live, or close to where people live. So if they've got to drive, they drive. They've got to provide parking, and buildings you can walk up. You don't have to stand in a queue waiting to get in the lift. And all of a sudden, you've got sustainable buildings. Almost by chance, we're going to emerge into a period of.
Can you believe it?
Sustainability, yeah.
Can you believe it? So I'm a guy that concrete stuff if there's the option for grass. I'm not eco-friendly at all. But can you believe how sustainability is coming into its own in 2020? It's just incredible.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Look, we're really excited, and we like challenges. We backed ourselves with these buildings in Sydney and Melbourne. We're looking to do more of them, possibly a smaller one on the northern beaches up the Pittwater end. But we're certainly looking around outlying areas in Sydney for some of these opportunities.
Amazing.
So they have a land holding out there that would be ideal for a lifestyle building or vision out there, because a lot of people are sometimes they're a bit afraid of what is going to be built there. They go, this would be a great site for a building, but we don't want basically a D-grade building there. We don't want the type of people it would bring. We don't want the businesses out there. So if there's a great land holding out there where you would like it developed, environmentally friendly, sound, high quality, then give us a call. We can facilitate it. And that's what's out there, because sometimes it's not what people aren't against the development of a property. It's the unknown of what the quality is going to be built there, and then what that brings a lot of the time. So now more than ever, it's going to be more important than teaming up with the correct builders and architects and developers to build something that the community wants out there and what businesses want. So let us know. We've got Ed here that can help.
And Ed, thank you very, very much, because people's perception is money hungry, developer.
Yep.
Don't care about anything. I don't care about anything.
See you later.
See you later. And you're a man that has believed and had passion and furiously fought for what was right and wrong in the commercial sector, backed yourself, followed through the dream for 20 years, and nobody is going to thank you for it. But from the community and from the commercial agents, thank you for such a beautiful, beautiful building in 2020, the lifestyle working in Brookvale, from the community. And I love to see your next, if that's what you've done with the 15 years ago in your brain, I cannot wait to see what you're going to do the next 15 years.
Yes.
Well, we've got a few things rattling around in our brain at the moment, but we think this COVID, whilst it's got all the obvious challenges, we think there's opportunity out of adversity, and this is a time for people to rethink how we do things across, property, communications, but in our world, the real estate sector. And I think there's some fabulous opportunity to really drive home the fundamentals of, basic sustainability, going back to the way we did things in the old days. There's nothing wrong with that. Walk upstairs, open a window.
Love it.
Don't turn the air conditioning on.
I'm sure we could go on for hours, but I think that's a wrap. And thank you very much. Anything else you want to add there, Mark or Ed?
Mark, a brilliant mind. Ed Horton, thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
See you guys.
Appreciate it.
See ya. Bye.